Welcome everybody to the next episode of Hardball Talks. And today we are going to be diving in to a new innovative system that we created at Extreme called the Athlete Evaluator System. And we're going to talk about what that is, why we developed it, what are some of the questions and data that is coming out of the system, and maybe even go into some next steps on how we plan to use this data as part of our player development process. So today, just kind of going around the room, we have Hunter Hisky, who is in charge of player development at Extreme. We have Jess Schmittling, who is the director of softball at Extreme. And we have Jeff Wetzler, who is the performance and hitting director at Extreme. And each person, along with other, directors and coaches at Extreme, had input on what this athlete evaluator system is and why it's, we hope that it's going to be a big piece of driving the motivation and intent and focus of our athletes on certain development pieces of their game. So let's go ahead and dive right in. I'm going to start with Jess and I'm going to start with Hunter. Let's just briefly overview what is it and why did we create it. So Jess, go ahead and just share a few seconds of those two aspects.
Yeah, the Athlete Evaluator, it's a form that we're able to use to collect some data around just different points that we felt were important as part of our player development team. So essentially, how it got started was we started talking about very specific athletes inside of our program. We talked about things like, what is their strength like? What is their mobility like? What is their on-field performance like? Who are they as a teammate, and what's their work ethic like? And we were able to start to see some correlation between certain athletes. And from that, we wanted to give a place for both coaches and athletes, and really even the trainers, to be able to evaluate kids in one system that we then could spit out some data to be able to use for our player development team. And it's kind of just turned into a lot of great data for us from there. So.
Yep. Yeah. I made note of, you referenced the connection and correlation between training and the field. We wanted to help athletes understand, how to create that correlation. Is there certain parts of their game that maybe isn't going well on the field, and is that correlating to maybe something in the weight room or correlating to something in their skill development? So trying to find that connection and that correlation and help athletes understand that, I think paints a really good picture for why there's certain components in our training. Why do we have certain components that we do in our training? Hunter, from your perspective, why is this process? Why is this,
system? What I like about it is just how much it's evolved in the last couple months. Like I think it started as just us trying to find correlations with athletes who have had success in college or in the upper high school levels, and also find correlations with maybe some of the athletes who haven't seen as much success. And see if we could find some common ground there and maybe use it as a way to attack and edit our training model here. But really what it's evolved into, with as much data as we've collected on it, is I think it's a really useful tool for every single one of our individual coaches to kind of use that however they see fit. So we send it out to all of our athletes and families to fill out for themselves. And I think it's going to really help our coaches kind of get an idea of where each athlete sees themselves, just so they can have that extra layer of communication, trust, and make sure that they're on the same page when they're talking about a game plan for the next 2 months until their competition season starts. And they can use that in individual meetings. They can just sit down and kind of have that information to themselves. So they kind of just know where the athlete is at. It's really up to the creativity of the coach. And that's what I really like about it.
Yep. Yeah. It started off, like you're saying, as kind of a, inside of our trainer meetings, talking about where athletes are developing, where they need to develop more. And so we did, we kind of started to rate athletes, or we started to give them grades. And then, we thought, boy, it would be good to get their perspective. And let's see if we're all on the same page. So So then we said, okay, let's get it out to the families. Let's have the families sit down, talk about this, grade themselves, grade their athlete. And then we went another step and we invited their team coach to do the same. And then when we looked at, so really you have 3 grades, you have 3, kind of, breakdowns of an athlete's development, and you can start to understand where there's good connection. So for instance, I'm around a lot of 17U athletes, and I've been using this system. I've been using these grades inside of our recruiting meetings. And I've been talking about, hey, I see you gave yourself this grade. I see that you believe you're at this level. And let's talk about what I'm seeing. Let's talk about what your trainers are seeing. And then let's make sure that those are connected, and we can help you develop your plan better, because you have a goal of playing at the next level. So let's make sure that you're having an honest assessment. So I think you hit it on the head there, Hunter, about how it's evolved into a tool that's giving families a perspective of, where their athlete is, and then also where their trainers think they are, or where their coaches think they are. So it's good self-reflection. Jess, what are the sections that are in the evaluator?
Yeah, so there's we have the power and just like overall strength component, and inside of that you have just that raw power, you have mobility, and then you have agility or speed. And then inside each one of those, they're able to rank below average, average, or above average. And then it heads into kind of that teammate side of things, or the intangibles, I believe is what we called it. And so who are they as a teammate influence? What's their work ethic like? Do they have a willingness to fail? Are they okay with getting uncomfortable? And then we have another section that's more of that on-field performance. So what they grade themselves inside of defense, offense, and then just arm strength, their overhand velocity, and then the last 2 components are ones around nutrition. So do they feel like they're in a space to lose, gain, or maintain their current weight? And then ultimately, where do they feel like that the percentile would put them at? So based on all those answers leading up to that, what percentile would that spit them out at across the Metro East area?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. So strength section, intangibles section, skill section, and then goes into kind of nutrition, goes into intent and uncomfortableness, and then it spits out percentile. Let's talk about the percentile. Why did we add that in there, Jess? Why did we feel like that was a, kind of an important generalization, or, ranking, if you will? What was our intent there?
I think, whenever we have athletes fill out, if they were to rank, above average in everything, as the team coach side of things, I'm actually having a lot of good conversations like yourself around the fact that if they're putting all of that, but then maybe they see themselves in like a 70th percentile, then obviously there's some discrepancy there of how they filled it out. So I think it's the percentile idea is really to be on the same page, so that, like I said, it's across the Metro East area. It's all of what's out there for baseball and softball. And so it led to a lot of good conversations up to this point about the fact that this isn't just your extreme team that we're talking about, or just your extreme program that we're talking about. It's the percentile, which I think is also probably why you've had a lot of good conversations specific to recruiting with that, because then it fits to what they're trying to do or trying to accomplish as far as their next level goals.
Right. Okay, let's kind of start deep diving a little bit into some of the sections. So we're going to go into the strength section first. When I look at the power section, what I wrote down is 88%. So we had 196 people respond to this, first go around. So, I mean, we have a pretty good sample size here. 88% noted average or above average in their, kind of power section of the questionnaire. Give a general kind of thought on that, Jeff.
Oh yeah, I'd say we're probably a little bit closer to average just based on the numbers that came through with our testing and looking at Train Heroic. But I think it's optimistic to look at that they think that they're above average, so like they know that it's coming. But I think having that as high as it is, it's probably tough to like keep them motivated and maybe put them down to maybe where they really are. Because when you're basing it in the facility, some of the guys that would put them as above average, they're probably just above average in the guys that are working out at a facility. There's other guys in the, at least the St. Louis area that are a lot stronger than some of the guys that we have. So it's, yes, we're powerful and strong in what is around us, but also kind of big picture of what are the other high schoolers looking like that are outside our facility.
Yeah. Yeah. Hunter, what's your perspective on that? I like the way that Jeff kind of talked about there of, it's we look at the correlation between what their feeling and perception is versus maybe what the numbers are. What's kind of your
I think
perspective there?
It's different for every case, right? Like there's some kids who might have developed a ton in the last year and they see that and they're really excited about it, so they rate themselves maybe higher than they would compare to the rest of the area or the country, even whatever they're ranking themselves up against. And then there's some guys that desire more, even though they are in that top quadrant of athlete, and they're looking at it on a broader spectrum, like they're comparing themselves nationally to guys, which some of our top guys need to be comparing themselves on a national scale. I think it's definitely up for interpretation, and that's why the one-on-one conversation between trainer player or coach player needs to take place, just so we get a little bit of perspective on it.
Yeah. Jess, what's your general view on maybe softball athletes and them kind of grading themselves in this power section?
So I think to me it's more about how does that power section then relate to on-field performance. I don't know that we're going to get it every single kid to grade themselves with the realism of what is out there as far as Metro East national level, because maybe they haven't even experienced it. So if they feel like they're above average in power, then they should be ranking themselves above average in their on-field performance as well. And if not, there's either something wrong there as far as that correlation or their understanding. And so I think that is where the next layer of conversations happen with the athletes, being able to say like, okay, if you really feel like you're above average in power, but maybe you're below average in offense, why the discrepancy there? So to me, it's being able to link those two together.
Yeah. Recently was with, again, with some of the older athletes, but I was recently with an older athlete and, in the weight room and really they're what I would call sort of the intensity or the push or the, increasing in weight, when they were getting after it. It just wasn't quite there. They were staying in really, I would call kind of comfortable ranges. So I think also like, this data is important for us because I think I love how you said that, Jeff, we can celebrate where they've come from and where they are, right? The improvements they've made. But I think we can also encourage them based on how much more is still in the tank and how much, how many more gains they can make once we can get that intensity or that uncomfortableness to keep rising. So I think, good data to have, good to understand kind of the psychology of what our athletes are feeling in the weight room. But I think it leaves open some education that we can do as well. Let's go into another one where I think is some education is needed. Let's talk mobility. So when I look here at the data, 89% of our athletes noted average or above average, in the mobility section. Jeff, kind of start with you again. What do you feel about that when you kind of see that data?
I think it's a lack of knowing really what mobility kind of means, what it means to have above average mobility. Baseball and softball, two sports that required you to get into some crazy positions, on the mound or in the box. So you got to be mobile to be successful and to, prevent any kind of injuries that could happen from your body. So I think it's just a lack of knowledge of knowing what we meant by mobility and what they understand as mobility. Because I think we've had this conversation before, like they may bend over, touch their toes, be like, well, I can touch my toes, I'm mobile. But that's like the very minimum thing. And wouldn't consider myself very mobile, but I can touch my toes fine. So there's definitely levels that I have to improve in my mobility, but I think it's just a lack of understanding what being having above average mobility is.
Yeah. Hunter, maybe put your player hat on, your pro player hat on. I imagine from when you were a high schooler to when you were a pro player, your understanding of mobility changed. and your focus on mobility changed. Let's just do a quick education session. When we say mobility and you think about high level baseball and softball athletes,
Yeah,
what
I
do you
think
think?
for a lot of guys, especially on the baseball side, it's the lowest hanging fruit, right? That nobody really thinks about. Um, I think you can take some
Mm-hmm.
really good athletes that maybe are tight and can't get into the right positions. And I'm thinking about this from a catcher's perspective because that's how I was introduced into the mobility world in baseball was going up through the ranks as a catcher, having to get down into some of those positions. But it really can unlock some things when you have some extra thoracic mobility up top to create velocity. That's an extra every couple inches that you can gain with some T-spine mobility or even some scapula mobility. Every couple inches that you gain can add that much more velocity just right there. And then hip mobility is a big thing as we get in talking to our defensive positions, getting into the proper launch position as a hitter without feeling like you're really forcing it, which we see a lot in our guys is having to feel like they're forcing it into certain positions. But when we unlock some of those mobility in their hips, then that can make it feel a lot more effortless for them.
Yeah. Yeah, Jeff, coming back to you, same sort of concept or same sort of question. When you're at the college level coaching hitters and coaching, in the weight room, what did good mobility look like to you, and why was that important for you to get college athletes to improve on?
Honestly, just everything looked easier for them. When guys move down the mound, that they're mobile, like it just looks effortless. It looks like they're not trying as much, so it doesn't look like they're straining their body as much. A lot of guys, going to the college level, they're already pretty big, they're strong, they're pretty quick, but a lot of things that's lacking is the mobility. So it's kind of just understanding good movement and kind of prioritizing the movement of the weight versus like how much weight you're actually lifting. So yeah.
Recently I was with a softball hitter, and it was a college hitter, and she, was struggling with a certain pitch and struggling certain locations and certain zones and being able to cover that with her bat path. And obviously hitters, they always want to go to like drills, and they always want to go to, what's a drill I can do, or what's a, or how should I set the machine up, or what. But the reality is that there really is some mobility hindrances that she was having, right? She couldn't hold a side bend. She couldn't hold, she couldn't get some disassociation in her hips. She was really having a difficult time with that. So like I was trying to get her to understand, she was home for over break, and I was trying to get her to understand that, mobility has to be just as important in her equation as skill work, and that was sort of mind boggling to her. And she's a high level athlete. I mean, but really we got to get athletes to understand that it's not always the pixie dust of drills that allow them to unlock. I love that word that Hunter, you said, kind of unlock their maximums or their velos or their movements. I think that education and mobility is important. Jess, any final thoughts on that from your perspective?
Yeah, I think the concept at the beginning of this conversation, when Jeff was talking about it just from the injury perspective, that mobility can be the reason that a kid stays in the game. And there's a college athlete similarly that she had some hip issues all through high school, and just being able to have a dynamic warm up and stretches that increase mobility in her hips kept her in the game. Little did we know that going into college she wouldn't have that same warm up, and now she's out for her season because of the hip issues that she has. So just being able to be educated on mobility from that aspect can keep a kid in the game longer and hopefully prevent that injury long term.
Yep. So overall, on this kind of first, deep dive into the athlete evaluator system, we wanted to spend quite a bit of time in the strength portion of the form and of the survey. So let's continue down another one that came out of there, which is the agility section. So first off, let me just ask this, Jeff, to you. When you think of the agility section, why did we add that to the form, and what were we wanting the athletes and the coaches and the trainers to kind of evaluate? what makes up the agility section in your mind?
The ability to slow down, change direction, and accelerate into that new direction. Anybody can just sprint in a straight line 60 yards and have some good speed, but are you able to slow yourself down? Like, how long does it take you to stop yourself in that sprint? So it's really just being able to stop yourself. So what kind of brakes do you have to stop the speed that you got? Can you change the direction, then accelerate quickly out of that stop and into that new direction?
Yeah. We didn't have athletes didn't score themselves as high here. So they score themselves a little bit higher in strength and a little bit higher in mobility. What's our vibe on that, Jeff? What do we think athletes think of them? Our athletes think of themselves when they think of their agility.
I think I don't want to say like what they necessarily think that we thought about agility, but it's like maybe they think they're not as quick twitch, or they don't think they have quick feet, which to me, like, quick feet doesn't necessarily mean that you're agile. That just means you can move your feet fast. But can you put force into the ground, stop yourself, and redirect into a new direction?
Yeah.
So I think it's a little bit disconnect, because I felt like with the numbers that we saw in the power and mobility, that our agility should be up there as well. So I think, again, it's just kind of a little disconnect and a little lack of education and knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Hunter, do you have any thoughts on that?
What I was thinking the whole time Jeff was talking was maybe it's our guys feel that the most important thing is to go in there and just move as much weight as possible. That's what they get preached to by a lot of coaches and a lot of people in the baseball industry. If they're off-season programming, it's about how much weight can you move. Doesn't matter how fast it's moving. Doesn't matter how clean the movement looks. It's just about pushing weight. And when we do that, we train our slow twitch muscle fibers, not our fast twitch muscle fibers. There's not as much of a premium put on running sprints or changing directions or doing 5-10-5 stuff like that. That's not as cool, if you will, as it is getting under a squat bar and putting up 315 10 times. So it might just be more of a priority in what's important in the athlete's head.
Yep. And I think that's important. And I think, Jeff, one of the things I've noticed in the weight room this year is you've kind of brought a little bit of a connection to what a college weight room looks like. And I know even now as we head into preseason, it's not always going to be about how much weight we can move. We're seeing a lot of sprinting, a lot of change of direction, a lot of jumping movements that are showing up in there. How can we help our athletes understand that concept of maybe it's not so much about just how much weight at certain times of the year, but it's about how quick can they move the weight, or maybe a different variability?
Oh yeah, if you just sit and watch a baseball game or a softball game, you're going to see how quick the game is. The pitching motion of both really quick and explosive movements. The swing, the same thing. You got to sprint down the line, and softball you require even more speed because the field's so small and it happens so fast. So it's like getting to prioritize like what is actually needed in the game. If we had 5 seconds to swing the bat, I'm sure that we would work on a lot of heavier loads, and I would be worried about how fast we're moving it. The game requires us to be explosive, and if we're only moving slow and we can't put out all that power at once, I don't think we're training to help our athletes be successful. They need that change, and when you watch the game, you'll
right.
see it.
And you think about it, the heaviest bat that you could see swung in a high school baseball game is 31 ounces. So yes, I don't want to get misconstrued here. Yes, lifting heavy, there's times for it. It's important to build up your capacity to move fast, but at the same time, there's nothing in the game that requires you to lift heavy weight, or there's not really much of a strength component strictly. It's all power based.
Yeah, and I want to take this agility section and kind of put it into a skill place. So at the end of the year before the holidays, I was in the defensive training area, and we were doing outfield change of direction. Okay, so that was the focus of the drill, and I would take like 2 of the faster athletes, and I would take 2 of the slower athletes, and then I would have them all kind of complete the drill. And just because it was the fastest raw speed athlete, it doesn't actually mean that they were doing the drill the best. Their change of direction, the force that they put into the ground, to get them going in a different direction. Some athletes are really below average at that, right? They're really poor at that. So they they think, well, I have raw speed or I can beat them in a race, but that doesn't always equate to the range movements that we need on the field. And, I think that, I started to just try to get them to understand that range and raw speed are not the same. Yes, speed can be a component to it, but footwork and being able to get your body to decelerate and accelerate in different directions, like that's an area that needs to be a focus. It's very, there's some girls that they really excel at that in the outfield. And you're like, man, how did she get to that ball? Well, because she's really good at changing direction. And I think that's just an important reminder for our athletes to keep that a part of their focus. Let's kind of close out this strength section and shift over to the nutrition question that we had. So when we talk, just kind of restate that again. What did we ask? We asked about gaining, maintaining, building. How did we ask that question?
Yeah, so the nutrition part of it, they were able to choose between, they felt like they needed to lose weight, gain weight, or maintain weight. And then that was able to spit out to us as far as, again, kind of a collective data out of that.
So looking at the data, I mean, traditionally, Jeff, most of the guys in the program, selected gain as what their target is. That doesn't surprise you, right?
No, not at all.
Yeah. So, Hunter, I think most guys at the high school level, especially, feel like they need to gain. I know you've been trying to go into a little bit more detail with them on, properly gaining. Any pieces of advice or any thoughts that we all would have on this?
It's knowing yourself and knowing where you're at, which is why I like how the question was phrased, because some guys that think they need to lose weight might just need to change their body comp and kind of maintain the weight that they're at. And there's proper ways to put on weight. There's proper ways to lose weight without losing a bunch of your power and strength. And it's just making sure that we're eating clean, not going crazy on the unnecessary carbs, getting our daily protein intake that we need, which for at least on the baseball side, we recommend your body weight in grams of protein, basically. And then on the softball side, I know it's really close. I haven't dove into the exact recommendation, but I know it's right up there with your body weight and protein on the girls' side as well.
Yeah, Jeff, maybe let's dive into just a little bit on the female side. This question definitely got a lot more variability in its answers with our female athletes. What is we've been talking about trying to provide a little bit more education around that on the female side. What are you seeing, or how are you thinking about how to help our female athletes with this question?
Yeah, I think the biggest myth is they think that if they try to eat to gain weight and gain that muscle, that they're going to have this bulky look to them. And as a guy that's lifted 10 plus years and tried to have that bulky look, I still don't got it. So that it doesn't just happen just like that. And the girls that are really kind of bought into, feeding themselves and trying to gain weight, gain that muscle, they saw the strength side of it really kind of take off. And gaining weight is not a bad thing. And it's really tough with those athletes to get it through their heads. But, once you kind of, try it yourself and really apply it to yourself and kind of see the changes that it does make on your body, that's when you're going to kind of really learn about it. Like, every coach can say this and that and the other thing, but until you kind of apply it yourself and kind of see the results for yourself, that's when you'll really kind of truly see it.
Yeah, for the female athlete, strength is a little bit of a scary word for the female athlete to really talk about pursuing strength or pursuing size, because that goes a little bit against what they perceive culturally that to be. But ultimately, what our goal for them is to increase their strength level so that it increases their performance. I coached a lot of female athletes in college early on in my career, and I could see that the stronger female athletes had a lot more success, really with just their movements through the ball, their hitting, the deflection rate of their bat was a lot less. I think it's important for female athletes to correlate their performance with their strength and build. Anything to
Yeah, I
add on
mean,
that?
yeah, you look at girls that play in the College World Series, like look at the girls that are in the position that you want to get at.
Mm-hmm.
And the girls that have gotten stronger this past this through this winter, I think it obviously improves their confidence as well. Like they're
Mm-hmm.
excited to come to the weight room. They're excited to go train because now they're hitting the ball harder than they were. They're pitching the ball harder than they were. They're moving a lot easier than they were. They're faster than they were. So it just has a bunch of benefits in it. So getting strong isn't going to make you bulky. Getting strong is going to help out our power a little bit. Probably with the lifting and getting stronger and going through good movements is going to improve our mobility. It's going to improve our agility. Overall, our confidence and our play is going to take off with it.
Hunter, I know you talked a little bit about body composition there. I know a few of our athletes, we've made recommendations for them to, get on body comp machines so they can really understand how, what their numbers are and how they need to attack that. Just dive into that just a little bit more. Why is that? I would call that kind of a next level of understanding your weight. When is it the right time for an athlete to truly understand that and make body composition
Right.
part of their a part of
Well,
their
so
equation?
everybody has like kind of a peak weight that they compete the best in. Mine personally, when I played, was 195. I always wanted to try to be around the 195 mark because I felt the best. I felt like I was fast, but also not too light, where I could move weight fast as well. So everybody's got to find kind of whatever that peak weight is for them, and then try to minimize their body fat percentage within that. So now our baseball athletes, they don't have to go crazy. They're in high school. We don't need a bunch of athletes around here, 195 with 5% body fat, looking like Greek gods or whatever. But there's some guys that are kind of where they want to be weight wise, but their body fat percentage might be up closer to 20, and it's hindering their ability to run a 60-yard dash at the time they want to impress a college coach, or it might be hindering their ability to rotate fast enough. Because if you don't have the right body comp, it can negate some of your mobility. It also hinders your speed and your explosiveness. So just making that transition of eating the right protein, changing your macros, which is your carbs, fats, and proteins, maybe editing those to maximize what you're going to do and burn some fat, but also maintain the weight to improve your performance is probably the best route to go. We don't need those guys making big drops down to losing 20 pounds and then trying to put it back on the right way when you can just kind of transition your body fat to where you want it to be while maintaining that weight and not seeing any sort of dip in performance.
Well, let's finish up with kind of this strength section. We also asked the question around intent and kind of willingness to fail. Jess, how did we word that question, and what was our purpose of including that?
Intent was one we had a lot of conversations around of how to work to get to the root of what we were asking. I think ultimately, it's said all the time that baseball and softball are games of failure, and we have to learn how to handle and deal with failure. And so intent was around this idea of like, do we have a willingness to fail? So it kind of had three layers to it, if you will. We had the motivation piece of it, and that was the first part, was like, do I even have the desire to come in and get work done? And then once I'm there, okay, now do I have, the work ethic to work on whatever's on my checklist for that day? Am I going to get the drills done that I'm supposed to that day with a level of work ethic? And then it went into intent. It was the idea of like, okay, now that I'm there, I'm motivated to be there. I'm working on the work that I'm supposed to. And then now how do I feel about this willingness to fail and kind of do some of the uncomfortable things outside of, my comfort zone? So that's where we kind of worked through that to be able to ask those three questions to dive in a little bit deeper with each layer.
Yep. And Jeff, what are we seeing? What are the athletes, feeling about their intent and their willingness to fail? Like what are we seeing actually in their training sessions?
Yeah, I mean, it's really uncomfortable to go into the weight room and knowing you're going to have to put on some heavy weight under your back with a back squat or get underneath the bar with some heavy weight for a bench press. So I think that's like kind of the first level. Like if you're willing to do that and kind of try something new and and even fail at it, like, it's okay. You're not going to be able to get stronger without some kind of failure on there. If we're hitting every single one of our lifts and we didn't have one failed rep all winter, I'm probably questioning we didn't push ourselves hard enough at all. We, like, yes, good for us. We hit all of our lifts, but we didn't fail one time. So seeing athletes fail and correctly know how to spot makes it comfortable for them, willing to fail, willing to put on another 10, 20 pounds on the bar and go for it. And I think a lot of athletes were surprised this winter that they were able to lift it. Like, they tried it and they weren't so sure of themselves, but we had a good spot going, and it's like, hey, just give it your best. They went and succeeded, and it kind of makes it more for them willing to go in and try to fail. And I don't think we even hit some of that. Like, they went in there trying to fail, but they just kept hitting their lifts, so it was good.
Yeah. Hunter, kind of that failed rep concept that Jeff just talked about, like, talk about why that's important.
Well, I think it's important. I think it's important to push yourself in all aspects, in the weight room and on the skill side as well. We've got a lot of athletes that come in and they set up the machine, or they get their partner that throws them flips, and they just hit barrel after barrel after barrel after barrel, and they'll put on a show because it's easy and that's fun. There's no denying that it's a lot of fun coming in here and succeeding over and over and over again and showing off for maybe the younger kids that are in here. But you're going to kind of cap yourself lower than you probably could be if you would come in and set a challenging breaking ball up, or challenge yourself with a fastball with high velo at the top of the zone. Or if you're going into the weight room, do something that that you're not very good at, like a movement that you struggle with. For example, we have a lot of athletes that shy away from the squat rack because they're not very good at squats. They'll go straight to the bench press. They'll get it set up and they'll rep out bench press because they know they can succeed at it. They won't choose the movement that they know is beneficial for them to improve at, but they know it's tough on them. So that failure is both a fear element that they have to overcome, and also something that they need to do to benefit.
Yeah, it felt like step one for us a few years ago was getting the guys and girls to come in and get extra work, right? And whether that's in the weight room or that's in the cage or whatever. Now it feels like the challenge for us is to help them steer their intent, help them steer their uncomfortableness when they're getting that work in. I mentioned earlier, it was kind of around an athlete that was, working out this off season, and they did not want to push themselves to an uncomfortable place. They wanted to sit right in the comfort zone of being able to do 10 reps easily, or whatever that number was that they were going for. And when we talk to college coaches, that's probably one of the main characteristics of athletes that they want to see improve, which is that willingness to fail, that willingness to push, that willingness to fail, and to train to the things that you're not good at, not just training to the things that you're good at. So when we asked about intent, we saw on the data a lot of our athletes, they would say things like, I didn't work very hard that day, right? They would score their work ethic or their intent level pretty low. What do we think about that, Jeff? When we looked at that data and we saw some of the athletes do that, what were we curious about there?
And really, for one athlete, the workout could be really hard and challenging. For another athlete that might be in a little bit better shape, a little bit stronger, it may not seem as hard to them. So I think they're measuring intent as far as how hard the workout was on them, not necessarily how hard they were pushing themselves in that workout.
Yeah.
That's what at least looking at the data, it seemed that that there was that difference there, that it was more of not did they push themselves that hard, because I saw some like good lifts, but it was how hard was the lift on me, not how hard did I go after the lift.
Yeah, that's good. We also had some other intangibles that we asked about. Being a good teammate, pushing others. Jess, why do you feel? Why did we decide to put that into this evaluator system?
I think teammate influence is more important than we sometimes realize, because we are playing a team sport. So one of my favorite phrases, actually, Brett, when you've been doing some of the defensive training for my team on the coach side of things, is like, giving kudos to an athlete and then following it up by saying like, okay, now get your group to do that. Because it's one thing if you can go in and you can get the job done. Maybe you just are naturally gifted at that skill or whatever it is, but being able to be that teammate influence that brings along other people is really where we're going to see an entire team, an entire program really grow. So to us, it was important to understand, am I a positive teammate by just being around, and do I lift up the environment? Am I, somebody that kind of sucks the energy out of the environment? And then ultimately, can I get my teammates around me to grow alongside?
Yeah, Hunter, what's your perspective? Why did we add this section into the system?
Well, so I mean, we look at ourselves as a college preparatory program our goal is to prepare our athletes to compete at the next level. Some of our younger athletes, maybe that's to prepare them to compete at varsity, and some of our varsity athletes, we're preparing them to compete in college. But if I'm putting myself in the mindset of a college coach or a varsity coach, I'm not necessarily looking for the best player. I'm looking for the player that adds the most value to my team. And that's the perspective that we tried to have through this intent piece of the puzzle, or the intangible piece of the puzzle, is we're looking for the player that adds the most value to our team. And I know there's even some cases in some Midwest and national families where they think maybe their kid is a good enough player to be competing at the national level, and maybe they think some of the national players need to be competing down at the Midwest level because the talent level is not quite where it needs to be for national. But in those cases, a lot of times you'll see that they add value because they bring the right intensity to their practices. They make the guys around them better on a daily basis, and they add value through the intangible role more so than the skill side of things. So I think that's the lens that we need to look through it as coaches.
Yeah. Jeff, give us a college coach perspective. Why is this why do we need athletes to be able to self-reflect on their intangibles?
I mean, for a lot of guys, that could be their separator. There's a lot of guys nowadays that can hit the ball plenty well over 100 miles an hour, a lot of pitchers that can throw over 90. But what is going to be your separator? What are you doing off the field or in the dugout that's separating yourself from other guys? From coaching in college, and questions that I would have with four-year coaches when they would call recruit some of our guys was, how is he off the field? How is he as a teammate? They were probably already calling because they knew he could ball out. They want to know more of the human. Who is he off the field? How is he as a teammate? And then I would ask the same question to the high school coaches and travel coaches that I would recruit from. Like, well, what does his teammates think of him? What do you think of him? Is he a good teammate? So those are going to be the questions that the college coaches ask about you, and reflect on. And if you are that positive influence, know that you don't have anything to worry about. But it's definitely a separator for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that word, separators. I've definitely been referencing that word quite a bit. Just even recently, Jeff, I've been able to watch a lot of your former college athletes get their work in this winter, coming in the facility, and just the way they go about it, the way they help each other, the way they, they're in group settings, small group settings, working together, and the way they communicate, the way their intent, their focus, it's just separators. You're exactly right. It's these little things, these little stacking blocks, these little building blocks that they bring to the table that just allow them to separate from others. I was fortunate as a college coach. I coached 2 All-Americans, and I think of both of those athletes. And really, it wasn't the skill set. Yes, they could hit it hard and far and throw it hard and throw it far, but their separators were just incredible. The way they talked about hitting, the way they focused in the weight room, the way that they helped others, they led drills well. Like, they just brought a whole bag of intangibles that were value adds, like you were talking about there, Hunter. And I just don't think we talk about that enough. I think families aren't having those discussions enough. I think they're investing in training, they're investing in, training programs, but they're not fixing the core values of their athlete. And, this really goes to the core value side. And really, if you give me a core value, a foundation of core values, I firmly believe that a lot of times you can add on the skill stuff, around those core values and get to certain levels that you want to be at. I want to finish off just dabbling into the skill section. So of course we didn't leave out the skill side when we asked the athletes and coaches and trainers to evaluate our athletes, and we went into hitting, we went into pitching, we went into throwing, we went into defense. I want to land just a few minutes here, finish off on the defensive side. And this was an interesting data point. So I'm pulling it up here real quick. In the data side, over 93% scored as average or above average in defense. And frankly, somebody who trains a lot of defense, somebody who really values. I grew up as an outfield coach in high school, or that not grew up, but came up through coaching that way. I just have a lot of value and respect for defense. And frankly, we are not that high in defense right now. We don't score that well on defense in actual production on the ball field. So there's a disconnect there between where we think we are and where we need to be on defense. Let me just kind of go around the room. Why do we think that is? How can we help that? Just share whatever you feel about that skill section and about the data that's coming out of there. I'm going to start with you, Hunter. What screams to you when you kind of hear this data around defense?
So I think it's maybe a little bit of misguidance. It's the least worked on skill in the area, for sure, in this area being in the Midwest, and the majority of our off-season training is in the cold. Not every kid has access to a facility where there's open space where they can take ground balls. And there's definitely no fields at the moment right now with a foot of snow on the ground that are available to go work on defense outside. So it's definitely the least worked on skill. Now, that being said, our athletes do have access to a couple of open spaces where they can do some defensive stuff, and it's still the least amount of extra work that we see. Like if you see some of our athletes come in for extra work, you see them hit a lift and then they come in and they get swings in the cage, or if they're pitcher only, is they might go to the bullpen and do some arm care and catch play, but you rarely see our open spaces getting booked when they're available to hit fungos or work on short hops or whatever that may be. And that's really what it takes, is a daily grind on that stuff. It doesn't have to be hours a day, but it needs to be something every day to where they're working on their defensive skills, because like Jeff said earlier and alluded to, that's a separator. There's not really very many above average defenders in the area. Just being on the travel circuit for a few years at the high school level, it's pretty rare to see high level defenders. It's very common to see really high level hitters and high level arms that we face.
Yeah. Jess, do you want to add anything there?
Yeah, I think I keep going back to that idea of separator too, is whenever I was going through this on the coach side of things, it's like the only way I'm putting above average for somebody at that point is like if defense is the reason that you're on the field, if defense is the reason you're getting any sort of accolade for your high school, if defense is your ticket to the next level. And right now we just don't have a ton of that. We have other avenues that kids are kind of moving onwards and upwards, and being able to really dive back into the defensive side of things. I'd love for kids to find some reality through that and see them start working more on that whenever they have their time in the facility as well.
Jeff, give us your perspective.
It's just as big a part of a game as hitting and pitching. It's something that needs to be worked on, and it's not enough, but it's something that you can work on by yourself. It's something that you just need maybe a couple tennis balls and a wall and a glove to go through any kind of drill. So to me, it's like the easiest one to go through and get work in by yourself, but it's just not the sexiest one to go in and get that work in, because you're not hitting balls hard, you're not hitting cage bombs, like you're just flipping a tennis ball off the wall, doing short hops into a flat glove. So it's kind of, you got to get better at being boring. You got to enjoy the boring stuff. And because defense is a huge separator, you can go up there and be a great hitter, but if you're a liability in the field, a college coach is not going to put you out there. So again, we said it multiple times here, but it's a separator. Like if you're a guy that a coach can trust out in the field, he'll find a spot in the lineup for you.
Well, to me, I mean, like you said it, Brett. To me, if I'm a player and I'm looking at it through a player's lens, that's what I want to be the most prepared for. If I'm a high school hitter, what's the common goal? Hitting 350 or above. That's kind of the baseline as a high school player. As a college player, maybe that dips down to hitting over 300 is considered a successful offensive season. In pro ball, it's 250. is a successful offensive season. So there's a lot of margin of error and room for failure as an offensive player. But then on the defensive side, if you fail over 5% of the time, that is a really, really bad defensive season. Depending on the position, obviously, like there's some leeway. You get more opportunities up the middle, in the middle of the field. But even in those corner positions, that should even be more incentive to go out and really just make sure that you don't get as many opportunities. But when you do get that opportunity, it could mean a win or a loss. So and there's definitely not near as much margin for error on that side of the ball. So I would want to be more prepared for that if it was me.
Yep, that's great. All right, let's wrap this up. This was a great deep dive and introduction into, the Extremes Athlete Evaluator System, kind of this new process that we've launched this fall. Let's just go around one more time and let me ask this question. Where do you want us to take this next? Meaning, this data, this process, this system, what do we each want our, coaches, program, athletes, whatever, where do we want to go with this next? Jess, let me start with you.
I would say from the director perspective, probably going to answer into diving in with coaches, being able to have then coaches have the empowerment to take this into their athletes and have those conversations. I've done some with our high school age kids, but really being able to take it to the next tier and get all of our athletes on the same page through that avenue.
Yeah, I would really like to get opinions from our coaches on how they see best fit, because I know every team's going to maybe be able to use it a little bit differently. Maybe some new teams, you want to walk that tightrope a little bit. You don't want to ruffle as many feathers early. Whereas teams that have been in our program for a while, that you feel comfortable enough having some hard conversations with, you can use it in a little bit different light. And then long term, it would be cool to keep this going for, several years and kind of see some correlations as these guys that are in our program now as high schoolers get into college, to see who has success at the next level, who doesn't see success at the next level, and see if we can really use it to make our training maximal.
I just want our athletes to take it and use it. They're reflecting, they're getting information from the coaches and the trainers. Use it. Like when you get up to the higher levels, like there's not always going to be a coach there holding your hand and telling you exactly what to do. Like, at the college level, there's going to be a lot of work that you got to do on your own, especially then at the pro level. There's a lot of discipline that you just need to do what you need, and what's best for you. So I think it's just time for them to, they had the time to reflect. They got the information from the coaches, have the talks, but actually put it into action, learn from it, be knowledgeable about it, and take hold of your own career.
Yeah. And, I just want to finish up by saying this motivates me to continue to help educate the coaches and educate the athletes. We talked a little bit here today about areas where there's disconnect between our trainers and our players, or our coaches and our players, or whatever it may be. And education is what's going to be the link there. Why should the athletes value it? How can they put it into action? It's pretty common that we'll hear college coaches say, some of the athletes come out of our program, they really can connect the dots, and they come to the next level kind of prepared. To me, this is a separator for our athletes to be able to get more prepared to go to the next level. So I think it's motivating for us to educate them on it so that they can do that. All right. Well, thank you everybody for chiming in and providing your expertise and your perspectives on the Athlete Evaluator System. And I'm hopeful that this will continue to be something that we can track over time. And I love how you put that there, Hunter. Help us maximize the development of our athletes, because that's really ultimately one of our value, props, and something that's foundational to us. Thank you everybody for listening to this episode of Hardball Talks, and we'll look forward to bringing you the next one.